Dear friends, thank you for supporting this channel on Patreon to join our growing family of donors, now 59 patrons strong. And remember, once we reach 100 active patrons, we will start sending out a 1-ounce U.S. Silver Eagle, autographed by your host, Dunnigan Kaiser, to one active supporter each and every month. Thanks for taking a minute to pitch in by going to patreon.com/ReluctantPreppers and pledging your support today. Thanks very much.
Hey Reluctant Preppers, this is showing you just how easy it is to purchase silver without paying any premium over spot price. You just go to sdbullion.com/RP, scroll down and enter the special code to get silver without any premium, and they'll mail it to your mailbox, discreetly packaged. Inside you'll find a beautiful 10-ounce bar of fine silver, and you are able to purchase that and have it and add it to your stack and your collection without paying any premium, and you're supporting Reluctant Preppers along the way. Thanks.
As a responsible person with growing concerns for your privacy and personal liberty, you want to know where we're headed and what you can do about it. We ask the experts what you need to do to take prudent and responsible action to safeguard your family's wealth and well-being, and what basic first steps will help you to be aware and prepared. ReluctantPreppers.com.
Welcome back once again, Reluctant Preppers. We are with our off-grid Dr. J. Nielsen MD. As you know, he has a survival compound in the country of Haiti, also a Christian mission there, where he has been learning a lot about permaculture and food production, and also protection from severe weather and protection from other human elements if you need to, intruders and so on. He's here with us today to talk about an important topic for anyone who would be in an off-grid situation or even in living in a civilized society, and that is dealing with infection and infectious diseases. Dr. Nielsen, thank you once again for joining us here in Reluctant Preppers.
Thanks. I love doing it.
We would love it if you could talk with us about a concern that's pretty central to what most people's idea of health is, and that's the integrity of their own body. That they want to be the main living organism in their life, and they want any of the other living organisms that are part of that ride to be friendlies and not unfriendlies. So,
well put.
One of the concerns that anyone has living around other people is the potential of catching an infectious disease. There's also infectious diseases you can catch from other sources in nature, or if you get a cut or an infection, or whatever. And if you could talk to us about what are the most some of the most common and some of the most serious infections that people face, and what are the ways that we're dealing with them, or that our traditional, I wouldn't even call it traditional, I guess our current modern medical system deals with these things, which is not necessarily serving the best interests of the individual, and what we can do about it that's smarter.
Okay. I want to cover a few things. I want to start out talking about bacterial infections and why doctors are so terrible at managing them and what you can do to get your doctor to do good care. I want to talk about why you want to try and avoid oral antibiotics, because your entire immune integrity is in your gut, and the best friends you have are your intestinal flora. Don't screw them up. I want to talk about what you can do if you have to do oral antibiotics and how we can stabilize the gut if we have to do that. And I want to talk about viral infections. This is really important stuff because we think of ourselves as having no tools except symptomatic relief, and that is not true. There are lots and lots of tools, and that's important because we all watched Ebola almost get free on this planet, and it made me start stockpiling some stuff. And I continue to stay in that mode, and I want to teach people how to be ready for that. I think you and I touched on this once. And then the last thing I want to go to is I want to talk about what we can do to be ready as preppers in order to have the tools that we need. Okay. The primary thing, if we just had a little camera and we're following around mom with her kid, and he's got a middle ear infection, and he walks into his family doc, what's going to happen? Okay. And what happens today is that the family doc, first of all, is probably going to spend 3 minutes in the room. Second of all, he may not do much of an exam. He won't concern himself with why the infection happened, only that it exists. Therefore, he won't treat the underlying cause. In a middle ear infection, that would be eustachian tube obstruction and fluid. And then he's going to pick an antibiotic not on the basis of what makes sense, but on the basis of what he thinks insurance will cover. which will be amoxicillin most of the time, which doesn't work 87% of the time. I actually did the research on that in 1987 for Roche Labs. Numbers have not gotten better over time. And then the child's going to return not improved, and he's going to pick another antibiotic, and we're going to go on that merry cycle. Let's back that up and go, what should have happened there? Okay? All infection that is bacterial is always, with very few exceptions, except things like Lyme disease, about failure of drainage. And so you have acne because your pores are plugged up with comedones, and the Corynebacterium in your skin get inside and create this low-grade infection that makes toxins that cause the inflammation. You get an infected gallbladder because you have stones. You get a urinary tract infection because you're retaining urine. You get diverticulitis because you have a pocket and it won't drain. You get pneumonia because you failed to control mucus excretion from your lungs and retain those secretions. You get sinusitis because you retained fluid in your sinuses and didn't drain them. You get a middle ear infection because your eustachian tube closed and you couldn't get rid of the fluid and it provided a culture medium. If you want to not get a bacterial infection, then don't allow fluid to accumulate. And so a good friend of mine, I sang with him for 10 years, came in to pick up some supplements the other day. He's not my patient. He'd seen his family doctor 3 times for bronchitis and wasn't any better. And I said, Rick, are you wheezing? And he said, yeah. And I said, you need a bronchodilator. And I sent him home with my nebulizer from here at the office. And the next morning, he sent me an email and said, everything's gone overnight without an antibiotic. He just wasn't controlling his secretions. And so we ourselves should be asking the basic question, how do I liquefy secretions? How do I reduce the volume of secretions? And how do I mobilize secretions? If that's acne, then face scrubs and Fostex soap. If that's a gallbladder, Collinsonia, Rude, and standard processed products to liquefy bile plus taurine. But if it's bronchitis, it's don't let yourself wheeze, get an inhaler, take iodine because it's this best expectorant, okay? And don't do anything to thicken your secretions. People sit down, they take antihistamines. The number one cause of sinusitis and middle ear infections in the United States is people who take antihistamines, and that crystallizes and thickens your secretions.
They're trying to dry up their drainage.
Trying to dry up their drainage, and in the process, they're giving themselves a bacterial infection. What you want to do is decongest, which is Sudafed LA, okay? Or use natural products, and we'll talk about that when we get to viruses. And you want to get that fluid out. And then if you really want to do a good job, go buy a NasoNeb, which is a nasal irrigator with saline, and irrigate that stuff out, or use nasal sprays with saline, but don't do anything to stop the secretions. So this basic concept, doctors don't even think this way. They don't even ask the question, why did this happen? And most of my stories of getting people better from long-term infections all go back to asking the question, how do I improve drainage? How do I improve expectoration? Okay, so that's point one, is always ask yourself, why did this happen to me now, and how am I going to correct that?
Before we move the topic off of bacterial infections, the other common source I think people would be concerned about in a preparedness scenario is just simple cuts. If you're doing work, chopping wood or building something, it's quite easy to get a scratch or a cut that break through your...
And the cause of infection there is usually going to be either premature closure of the wound, failure of drainage, keep it open, or manage it directly and clean it up and suture it closed so that there's no egress for fluid to get in. And the other thing that's going to happen there is going to be a foreign body. You've got devitalized tissue because it died. An ER doc would never close up a wound that he thought anything was going to die. He'd take the dead tissue out and then close what's left of the wound, and you wouldn't allow a splinter or grit or stone or things like that. The safest way to manage a wound is to ask the first question, can it be safely closed? If it's a relatively clean wound, It needs sutured. I don't care if that's Sylvester Stallone after he fell out of the tree.
Yeah.
Sewing himself up with no anesthesia. This guy had nothing on it, but the one thing he made sure he had for survival was a needle and thread. Okay? And he closed that wound so it didn't infect. Barring that, the next thing you would want to do is make sure that you kept it open and let it close by secondary intention, but you're going to get a terrible scar.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. I'm not off bacterial yet. I'm still in there. I haven't even gotten to antibiotics yet. I haven't even gotten to causative agents yet. Okay. So we've gotten through the fluid management issue of why we got an infection. So now, okay, you failed. So you've got a fever, you've got pus, you've got a bacterial infection, you've got swollen lymph nodes. Okay. And what's your doctor going to do? We already covered that. Give you amoxicillin. Okay. No. The next thing you want to do if you're in traditional healthcare is demand that you get a culture before you start antibiotics. We have MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, is no longer a hospital-acquired bug. It's in the community. We have really nasty bugs growing out there in family members that are sick and have been in the hospital. The first thing we want to know is that I want to have a garden variety bug that is easy to deal with. But the second thing you get from a culture is sensitivities. And on third day, you get a report back to your doctor that says the antibiotic I selected is correct or incorrect. And if you do a culture, on day 3, your doctor should be calling you up and saying, attaboy, nice antibiotic, how you doing? Are you better? Or, I don't care how you're doing, I gave you the wrong drug and I'm faxing in a new script for you. Doctors don't do any cultures. They treat urinary tract infections, they treat wounds. Every week in my Monday, I had a guy who has been going to the wound center because he had his Achilles tendon repaired, and he has Lyme, and he had his Achilles tendon repaired, and it looked like it was healing for 7 days, and then it started draining. He's been in the care of his surgeon, an infectious disease doc, and a wound care center, and I'm the first person who ever cultured it 3 months later.
Oh, no.
I'm horrified. Okay, this is typical healthcare in America today. It's insurance dollar stuff. Oh, don't spend any money. Just give them $3 worth of amoxicillin and brush them off. And he's fortunately growing Staph aureus. Now, his doctor put him on bacitracin. Well, this is stupid. Don't ever use polysporin or bacitracin or neomycin. They all contain neomycin. Okay, and Battle Creek and Post and Kellogg's put 4 boxcar loads a year of neomycin antibiotic in all of the wheat and flour and breakfast cereal in our world before they ship it out because it keeps your cereal from infecting on the shelf. It's a preservative. We're all allergic to neomycin. Don't rub it on an open wound. I use topical clindamycin. Nobody's putting that in my breakfast cereal. And it penetrates. And so I took the guy off his neomycin that was causing a contact dermatitis and put him on Cleus. And I'm sure he's doing better today. I haven't talked to him. I sent him his thing, and he's going to take my culture to his infectious disease doctor, who ought to be humiliated, okay? But won't be. He'll have some brush on. And so don't ever take an antibiotic. The minute that your doctor says, I'm going to write an antibiotic, you go, what culture are we doing prior to that? Now, there are some things you can't culture. I can't culture an infected gallbladder. I can't culture middle ear, but I can do a nasopharyngeal culture, which is where the bacteria came from that got in my ear. I can do a throat culture. I can expectorate sputum. I can urinate. I can rub a swab on a wound. You know, if it can be cultured, culture it.
All right.
It's not an expensive test.
Is the concern that most people would have as a patient there not wanting to delay the start of care?
Well, I don't have to. I can start therapy while I'm waiting for the culture to come
see.
back.
Make your best guess. Make your best guess.
10 seconds and do a culture and then write my antibiotic. And now in 3 days when I'm wrong,
You get confirmation.
I know I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not blind.
Right.
Once you give the antibiotics, you've lost your opportunity to do cultures. I've seen people who have had a PICC line in and IV antibiotics for 90 days for a pneumonia because nobody ever knew what the bug was. And they're giving these big drugs because the patient's not getting better, and they come to me and I put them on a bronchodilator and they get better. terrible things can happen from uncontrolled
So the
infection.
key point that I'm hearing there is not only that there's a tendency in the care community not to do the culture, but there's a timing dependency that you've got to do the culture first, because once you start the antibiotic, it's going to mask
Absolutely.
the results you would have got from the culture.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So now let's start antibiotics. Okay. One of my office staff got this bad virus that's been going around that keeps coming back, and she started to get into a little bit of pneumonia. And she tends to do that, or she's under a lot of stress. Her immune system is a little weak. And all of this week, every day before she started work, she came in, I put a 25 gauge butterfly in her, I gave her 300 milligrams of clindamycin, 2,000 milligrams of Rocephin IV. And in 4 days, she's better. Why did I do that? Why didn't I write an oral antibiotic? Come on, that would have been easy, right? Okay, why the IV? The answer is I didn't destroy her gut flora. And she knows enough about immunity to go, and my really bright patients are, I'm at any one time in my practice doing 2 or 3 IVs a day, and people who are in my office for different things. Because people understand that when you give IV antibiotics, you get a quick kill, and you're not running that stuff down your gastrointestinal tract and killing all of your best friends,
Right.
lactobacillus and, et cetera. And so you're going to be hard pressed to get your doctor to do this. I'm unique in that. Okay. But, as much as possible, you want to go. Another story that gives you another clue of think your way through a problem. I was flying down to Florida for an agricultural meeting, and I had a head cold, and I got the first ear infection of my life. I couldn't clear my ear when I took off. I couldn't clear my ear. When I landed, I was already on Sudafed. I'd used some Afrin. I couldn't get this thing in at 2 o'clock in the morning. I am absolutely in agony. And I went, oh no, I'm going to take my first antibiotic of my life. I got nothing. I'm out of town. I'm going to walk over to the local Walgreens a half a mile away and write a script to myself. And I'm sitting there laying in bed, and I thought, I've got olive leaf throat spray, which is olive leaf concentrate and xylitol, both anti-infective agents. And so it has that little tube that goes down in a throat spray. I pulled that thing out, and it had a little drop on it, put it down inside my ear, and did that 3 or 4 times till I felt some run down to my ear. 30 minutes later, my ear pain was gone. I went back to sleep. The next afternoon, the server came out to put our plates out. It's a nice meeting, so we had dinner, and I followed him back to the kitchen. I said, do you have any garlic? And he said, yeah. And I said, real garlic, a clove of garlic. And he said, yeah, I got a clove of garlic. And it was an agricultural meeting. He actually went out in the garden and cut me a fresh clove of garlic, which was kind of neat. And didn't ask me why I wanted it. And I went back and I peeled it. And I took my pocket knife and I turned it into a slightly oval object and cut the end off of it and stuck it in my ear and plugged up my ear. And I left it there for 4 hours. And what'd that do?
Well, for one thing, nobody wanted to sit near you because you smelled
No, it wasn't going to be contagious anymore. And by doing that, that heated up that garlic and took the disulframs, which are mercury sulfides, which are completely antibacterial, and put them as a gas into my outer ear chamber, which is obstructed, and drove it through my tympanic membrane into my infected fluid. And within about 6 hours, my otitis media was completely resolved. I treated it with topical olive leaf and a garlic clove. That's pretty cool.
It is.
Okay. And I learned that from an old partner of mine when I was a traditional doc. I had this herbal doctor that was working for me in my urgent care center. And when parents would say, I don't want to do antibiotics, and were smarter than me at that time, okay, he'd say, okay, I got something. And these people would come back and go, do you know about this, doc? And I went, no. And I don't know what the biochemistry is. So I called Terry aside and said, what's the deal? And he explained the mercurial disulfides to me. And I went, wow, that's really cool. That's neat stuff. And of course, we know garlic's anti-infective, but I just never knew the mechanism of action. And so, the objective is that there are times when I have people who come in and they have cellulitis on their arm. And they say, I've been taking Keflex for a week. And I go, which arm are you treating? They go, the left one. I go, no, you're treating both of them. They're taking oral antibiotics. Why don't we treat the left one? And I give them topical clindamycin lotion and 12 hours later it's gone because I put 500 times as much antibiotic per cubic centimeter by putting the antibiotic in the right place and not treating the whole body, plus I spared the gut. So you always want to think about what can you blow into your nose, what can you blow into your lungs, what can you put down your ear canal, what can you gargle, what can you put on your skin. You know, how can I get out of taking oral antibiotics? The problem is most of those things are going to require a doc that cares and is creative, and good luck with that in America. Okay? And I've been doing it for years, but I mean, I can count on one hand the docs in this country that know that stuff.
Now, clindamycin you've mentioned in a couple of these scenarios, and I think you mentioned it previously when we were talking about your survival emergency
Absolutely,
medical
what a
kit.
great drug.
But is it available over the counter or only by prescription?
No, it's only by prescription. But here's the neat thing about it. If you take one capsule of 300 milligram clindamycin and convince your family doctor to write you 30 of them, okay, you now own an antibiotic that almost nothing is ever resistant to. Problem with this drug is you keep taking it and don't take any probiotics, and you can get a terrible thing called Clostridium difficile colitis and bleed to death. It has a rare but really threatening infection. So I don't tend to use this drug orally unless I think I'm going to die. Okay? But if you take one capsule, put it in a bottle of isopropyl alcohol, or if you want to be a real purist, go out to the liquor store and get some Everclear, okay, and put it into ethanol, you have made topical clindamycin solution you can apply topically to wounds and topical infections. So it's a great antibiotic to have in a survival kit.
Any concern about frequent use of that topically causing this other...
There has been documented Clostridium difficile in people who've used it and were immunocompromised, but not in people who are healthy.
And the short name for that is C. diff? People talk about being concerned about C. diff?
C. diff, that's what it causes.
Okay.
It really, really is so good at knocking out bowel flora that I really am real slow to use it orally.
Orally, okay.
Yeah, I only use it topically and put it in nasal irrigation rarely, and gave it to my staff IV and put it on topically, but I don't tend to use it orally.
All right.
A little risky. But what a great drug if you're really backed up and you can't get to a doc and you're dying and you go, wow, I don't want amoxicillin. This is a great drug to have in a safety set.
Anything else before we move on from the topic of antibiotics?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm okay there in a broad overlook. I'm always surprised how fast time goes, so I want to go back to viral. Okay. And I opened that discussion with reminding us all of how concerned we were when we heard about that registered nurse who flew to Cleveland to see her sister with Ebola because she thought that she had the right to do that and public health had no right to put her in prison. When I was a little kid, if you had strep throat, the public health department came and told the whole family they had to stay in the house and put a notice on your door. Tells you how old I am. Okay. And now the American Civil Liberties Union believes you're allowed to fly around with Ebola. We've kind of lost the public health model in the world. Okay, we're never going to quarantine anything because we all have the right to infect other people. And the CDC doesn't know what to do about that. They think that's horrifying, but they can't do anything about it. And when that Ebola thing happened, I started collecting real hard. And these are the things that you want to have to control viral infections, okay, all of which are very, very important. First of all, we all ought to have a quart or bigger of hand sanitizer. Okay. You want to, if you watch people who are working in those environments, they're very careful to keep themselves hand sanitized between glove changes and wear masks. So we want to own masks. Preferably, we'd like to own a couple of those disposable surgical suits, actually washable hazmat suits would be fine. And we'd like to have gloves, and we'd like to have, our lotion. Let's try. Someone has to be a caregiver to a sick person. If it's Ebola, I might make that person go out and live in the yard. I'm not so sure I want him in the house. I might sacrifice that person if I was convinced they're Ebola, because I don't think that's going to work. I think isolation is the only thing that saves you from Ebola. And then we go, okay, so I've done what I can to not get it on me. I'm not inhaling it. I'm not touching it. And I'm taking the best thing I can, perhaps relatively strong Clorox, and making sure that I'm washing doorknobs and faucets and phones and all objects of common contamination. This is called Thermite Exposure. You touch that pad, and I touched that pad on that computer. Okay, that's Thermite Exposure. So you have to think that way. You have to think. Most people go, they've seen that thing in Life magazine where the guy sneezes 12 feet. Yeah, that's a little true, but what he really did is he sneezed in his hand and shook your hand. That's where it came from. It's Thermite Exposure. And so first of all, you have to not let people who are sick touch things, and you have to Clorox things with pretty strong Clorox that have been touched, and keep cleaning things. Okay, so now we get down to the fact that I'm getting sick and I want to stop it, and I know it's viral.
Okay.
What do I own? Okay. Probably, if you asked me to only own one thing, it would be colloidal silver. It is a true antiviral and a true antibacterial.
How's the shelf life?
Oh, probably 50,000 years. I mean, it's silver in water. The shelf life is probably determined by the container.
Heard a wide range of opinions about different qualities or different
Absolutely.
types of
There are
colloidal
two
silver.
kinds of colloidal silver.
Right.
There is the kind that is clear, and it is poisonous, and no one should use it. It's the stuff that you can make by putting pre-1974 silver on a battery in solution and turning it on. That's making silver salts. Silver salts are absorbed into the body. Okay, those products are all clear. I never allow my patients to use them. Okay, there are lots of commercial products that are clear. The product that I'm talking about is this color right here.
That's the brand we have.
Yeah, right. And this is Meso Silver. This is the best manufacturer in the world, and I carry it in gallons because I use it to refill people's bottles. Okay, and it comes in ounces, and I give people 2-ounce spray bottles and etc. Remember, it's the same thing that the burn unit is using, Silvadene, for controlling infections topically. It is your number one antibacterial antiseptic day to day, both as a prepper and as a consumer. You shouldn't be using Neosporin or clindamycin. You should be using that. That's a good topical anti-infective. It'll affect acne too.
Topical.
Yeah, sure. It's pretty good. You think, oh, I hope that doesn't infect. Put some colloidal silver on it. It won't infect. Okay. The way that this stuff is made is they take a laser and they take a silver ingot and they put it under water, and the laser knocks off individual atoms of silver metal. And because they're individual atoms, they're soluble. They're light enough they don't precipitate. And when you ingest them, the body lacks the ability to turn them into a salt. Metal's relatively stable. Okay?
Yeah.
That we also used to do the same thing with gold for rheumatoid arthritis. It turned you black. This stuff doesn't turn you black. The other stuff turns you blue, right? That's those things we read about, those blue people in Kentucky. Okay? And this is excreted again in your urine unchanged. But in the middle of it, it is getting into your ribosome 70s and really changing bacteria, and it is really screwing up the replication of viruses. And the more of it you take, the more effective it is. And so honestly, owning a gallon of this for $150 or $60, whatever it is, you can get it from puristcolloids.com.
Yep, right.
Okay. It should be in your survival set, because when you start getting sick, you may have 5 or 6 people to treat, and you want to be taking 4 ounces a day.
That's a lot.
If you're trying to stop a virus, okay, I have 4 gallons of this at home as a prepper.
Because I think they talk about like a 1 teaspoon dose size or something.
Yeah, let's do it a little bit. It's doing a little bit, but if I think I'm going to get Ebola, I'm up in that puppy a bunch. Okay, a big bunch. Okay, and so that's one. Okay, and so you really want to own that. The second thing that is out there that you want to think about is lysine. Okay, lysine is extremely effective against herpes and shingles, but it is in general a broad antiviral. okay? And it's very cheap, okay? I get mine from a company called DC. Comes in 1,000 milligrams, and you want to take 4,000 twice a day. Remember, this is just an amino acid. It's a protein your body already has. What you're doing is taking it up. We all remember it from Jurassic Park.
Yeah, the lysine contingency.
Lysine contingency, okay? It's that lysine, okay? So it's a natural thing in the body, okay? The third thing you want to own is olive leaf.
Yeah.
Olive leaf is a phenomenal antiviral. When I'm coming down with a head cold, my management of a head cold is 4 Seagate, best manufacturer in the world, olive leaf capsules every 4 hours. And once I started, I never quit for 3 days because too many times in my life, I'd take 1 dose of 4 and then 6 hours later, my throat would come back and I'd go, oh no, I shouldn't have quit. And then it doesn't work as well. You stay on it every 4 hours, 72 hours. That's a bottle of 60. You're done. Colloidal Silver, nose spray, throat spray, oral. And then I take my vitamin D. Vitamin D is incredibly antiviral in high doses. I'm already taking my 6,000 units a day sublingual. My vitamin D level's perfect. I'm coming down with a cold. Boom, I go right to 15,000 units for 3 days. So I go to 7 drops every day, okay? I get that vitamin D way up. Studies have shown it stops influenza. 3 days later, I stop and I let myself wash out from it for a week because clearly I've had enough vitamin D for the week, and that works. The next one that you want to look at is Moringa Powder, which every missionary in the world grows and sells from the third world into the first world. And we have a huge study showing that we doubled the survival of HIV by just giving people Moringa. And we don't know the anti-infective components of Moringa, but you can buy it for about $15 for a 2-pound package of the powder. Shelf life's going to be 10 years. And support some missionary who's growing it and selling it because it's a third world product. I have 300 trees in Haiti. And it is going to be antiviral. So I got every ore in the water. I mean, if I'm out there thinking that I've got, something that Fort Hood released on the country, or Ebola, which some people think that came from Fort Hood, but, et cetera, et cetera. Any one of those things, and I'm watching people die, my first thing I'm going to do is isolate myself, let no one in that I don't know where they're at and what they're doing. If I need to let them in, I'm going to let them into the outer ring of my compound, and I'm going to throw their food and water to them, and I'm going to make them stay there for 7 days while I watch them, quarantine. And then when they don't get sick or die, then I'm going to let them in. Quarantine concept is real important to preppers. They need to really understand the concept that you can't say, oh, that's my sister Sarah. Not if Sister Sarah's been out in Ebola land. Sister Sarah gets to sit in the parking lot, and we throw her food. And in 7 days, when she isn't sick, we go, now you can come in. Now you're a valued member of the team. And the minute that somebody inside the compound gets sick, they get to go out and sit on the other side of the parking lot from Sister Sarah because you don't know if they have the same thing. That's quarantine. Okay, real important. A lot of people will let compassion make bad decisions when it comes to really life-threatening situations. And there have been a million books written about this, all fiction. Great books about the world ending.
True.
And, including Omega Man. Okay, I Am Legend, Ian Fleming, that stuff, great stuff. A lot of things to be learned from watching those movies. Not as good as the greatest survival book in the world, Malaville. Have you read it?
No.
Written in the 50s, after the big nuclear thing and the above ground blasts, the Europeans, some guy, Robert Purcell, I think, but the book is Malevil, and you'll only buy it used. It's out of print. And it's a story of 3 high school friends who are getting together for a reunion and happen to be in the bottom hole of a castle making wine when the nuclear blast happens. And when they come up, nobody's alive. And then what happens in the coming years. And it walks you through how you recover from a 99% loss of population, because we know that what will happen is people will group and militarize. and then they'll try and take you over. And it really teaches you what happens inside your group as your group makes bad decisions. It's really a great book, great training book. It and Lucifer's Hammer, my other favorite book by Jerry Niven. Yeah.
So on the topic of infections, avoiding them, healing them, and so you've given us a range of advice all the way from requesting cultures when your doc suggests
treatment
first. Like make sure you get the culture before you get the treatment.
Right.
You've talked about some over-the-counter remedies to avoid, but to replace with some other topicals.
Topicals and nebulized and solutions.
Yep. And you've talked about things that you can put in your emergency management kit to be able to even snuff out.
We haven't really covered that. Let's go back and look at the infectious disease thing. We've covered the viral stuff, okay? And we talked about the clindamycin, but there's a let me look it up. There's a pharmacy, and I want to give people the numbers on this global. This is why I like being at my desk for this. The company is at the website globalpharmacyplus.com. Okay? Watch these prices. Combivent inhaler, $35. They're $400 in the US. Okay? Omnicef, a better Caflex, 50 of them for $12. Cleocin, 150 milligram capsules, not very big, but 80 of them, $22. Septra, the sulfa, number 90. Minocycline, excellent antibiotic, number 96. Azithromycin, the Z-Pak, 30 of them. That's 5 treatments, okay? These are all in there because a Lyme patient didn't have insurance, and they were all Lyme drugs, right? And so if you've got a friendly doc who will let you stockpile, you really want to go up and look at your basic antibiotics and not expect your insurance company to pay for it.
Right, they won't.
And get more of them than you'd usually get for a 10-day supply. And most of these things are coming in 30-day supplies because they're there for long term. And if you could get 4 or 5 of those are all good choices. Azithromycin, minocycline, Septra, Cleocin, and Omnicef would be an excellent armamentarium. And don't believe the outdates on them. Missionaries are confronted with using out-of-date meds all the time. So about 10 years ago, we took the top 100 drugs we use in the mission field and we kept them for 10 years and then tested them. The only drug that you can't keep beyond dates is minocycline. Minocycline, tetracycline, and doxycycline break down into a drug called oxytetracycline that kills your kidneys. Okay? Every other drug on Earth, when kept for 10 years, still had 95% of its potency and it turned into nothing dangerous. Don't throw away drugs that have outdates on them that are expired.
Yeah, that's a real contrary advice because so many times recently there's this whole expired prescription collections, and it's a big drive. It's a big publicity.
That's so that you buy more. It's just like Doritos. Don't worry, we'll just make more. Eat all you want. Throw away all you want. Our disposable society. It's just the pharmaceutical industry driving you to buy more stuff. It's not true.
Other than the ones that you listed there, there are exceptions to that. Any other words of wisdom for people either working with preventing or treating infections that we should mention?
Well, we all want to be trying to improve our immune system, okay? And if you want to improve your immune system, obviously, vitamin D is number 1, okay? Incredible support. And number 2 would be vitamin C, and number 3 would be B-complex, okay? But also, remember that you have 2 things that you're really trying to do in order to improve your gut health and your immunities, all coming from your terminal small bowel. What you want to do, remember that 70% of all the serotonin in your body is in your bowel, okay, and 50% of all your lymph nodes, okay? And so you can always be out there taking probiotics and making yogurt and taking digestive enzymes. But remember that any fermented food is giving you both your probiotics and better digestive enzymes. And every prepper ought to own Katz's book on fermentation of foods. It is a wonderful book, and it teaches you how to make coleslaw and kombucha and to maintain your cultures and pass them forward, and how to do it in crocks. And you don't have to do it in crocks. You can do it in 5-gallon buckets, okay? I have 300 5-gallon buckets with lids that I won't let any of my people on the farm use for anything. They're stockpiled. They're all prepper supply, because I want to be able to grow cabbage and onions and green peppers and throw them in there and ferment them, because that is your best. How do I get from one growing season to the next and have food, along with canning? Which, by the way, tomorrow, Joann Fabrics has a 50% off sale on all their canning jars. I'm going over and buy all of the ones. I'm stocking up. Yeah. Yeah. So, really, your last thing is, you gotta get that, gut to keep you healthy, because that's why you aren't going to get Ebola when somebody else did. Remember that when these viruses come through with 95% kill rates, nobody asks the question, what's the 5%?
What are the 5% doing right?
Yeah, and the answer is they're doing all the things I'm talking about.
Now, I've heard it written, and I haven't checked into this, but I don't know if it's an urban myth or not, but that the surface area of your intestinal tract has the villi, microvilli, and everything is where you encounter the outside world more than your outer surface of your skin. In other words, we think about not wanting to catch a cold by washing our hands and by not touching dirty things, but meanwhile we're putting the outside world into our bodies all the time, and that's where our body and our immune system is encountering the outside world.
That surface area is as big as a football field. Okay, and the other surface area that will surprise you is the surface area of your nasal cavities, which is about 3 square yards, which is amazing. That's how many convolutions and surfaces are up in there. It's amazing. And you start covering that with a bunch of mucus and plugging up a bunch of cavities, and man, stuff's going to grow and bad things are going to happen. And all of that surface area is just about 4 millimeters away from your brain. When people come in, they say, I got sinus. And I go, we all own sinuses. You have sinusitis. And they say, I've had it forever. And I go, yeah, well, it's a bacterial infection 4 millimeters from your brain. That's how I look at it. I don't look at it like you do. I want it out of there. That's why I use a NasoNet every day.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about, and a lot of tips that people are not going to be hearing from their average medical doctor that they're going to see.
Because they're not looking for the cause. They're not looking at the underlying biology of why we're getting sick. If people would work really, really hard on liquefying their secretions when they get a head cold and taking antivirals, they would just be amazed at how all these, I'm seeing the doctor 6 weeks later, and bronchodilators. Everybody ought to own a good inhaler. Better yet, a nebulizer with the solution you put in it. Amateurs don't tend to be good at inhalers. And so I really like nebulizers. You can buy one for $10. They're available on eBay. Now all you got to do is get on Global. And Global will sell the ampules that go in the solution for $35. It's like $400 at an American pharmacy.
And for $35, is that a single treatment?
No, not at all. That's probably 2 months' supply.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, the prices are incredible. You can't use every Canadian pharmacy. This pharmacy, I've spent years looking through Canadian pharmacies. This one is European. A lot of this stuff's coming from Slovakia and Romania and really top quality labs. Yeah. When you go to most Canadian pharmacies, what you're getting is Chinese or Indian.
You mentioned that in our earlier talk about
terrible drugs,
about the finances.
Terrible quality.
And I'm going to tie it back because in one of our first episodes with you, you talked about the financial system being broken around the medical system, about how so much of the money is being diverted. There's conflicts of interest. It's not really serving the patient. So here's a question, and it's sort of a prepper-related question. If someone, as the medical insurance and medical provider industry has continued to grow, big pharma and big hospitals and big insurance, people are seeing that the system is taking more and more of their earnings to provide less and less real healthful
Did
coverage.
Did you see Donald
everybody.
Trump's thing today?
No.
He's coming out with a new insurance program that is going to be outside Obamacare and avoid all of Obamacare's requirements, and is going to allow you to opt out of chemotherapy and nursing home care and all that stuff, and just insure emergency surgery and outpatient care, and not make you be in a pool with people who are sick, and be able to get an insurance policy that's cheap and actually covers stuff.
Oh, this might be closer to what I was about to ask, because I was asking
There you go. There's a good idea.
for people who want to be. People have been afraid for a long time. I've got to stay with my current job, or I've got to stay with my insurance no matter how expensive it gets. If I lose or leave my job, I've got to go on the COBRA because that's all I'm going to get.
Right.
And they're concerned. But if people say they feel in their gut that they're paying more and more for less and less, and it's serving to transfer their hard-earned money into these wealthy drug companies and wealthy hospital administrators and wealthy insurance companies. And if they wanted to think, is there a responsible option that I can consider to take care of my...
Obamacare made it illegal, but Trump's proposal, if it passed, would be the first logical thing I've seen. The correct thing to do to fix all of the healthcare in America is go to open market and cash. If you made everybody have to publish what they did and then allowed people to do an open, a good example, I owned a laboratory, and Medicare came in one day and said, here's your new fee schedule. And I looked up at my partner and I said, Jack, we're going to be rich. This is 30 times what we charge. And he says, this is a disaster. He says, in 2 years, there'll only be 5 labs in America and we won't be one of them. He was right. We went out of business, and the guys, the big boys, took all the prices up 30-fold. You go down to my local hospital and get a PSA test for your prostatic cancer, and it's $569. I got the same test for $22 through my voucher program. And they're making money off of that $22. So what's that test cost to do? $4 or $5? And they're charging $569? If we had an open market, and it's illegal for me to advertise in the paper that I have a lab program for cash. I'm not allowed to advertise that. The FTC and the Commerce Department won't let me do that. It's all suppressed. And I tried to do it, and a friend of mine said, you need to contact your attorney. And I went, no way. And he said, yeah, and I contacted my attorney. He said, oh, God, I'm so glad you called. Oh, God, you'd have gotten 5 years. I went, you got to be kidding me. He says, no, you're not allowed to put in that you're competing with people. You're not allowed to put other people's prices in. You're not allowed to say what you're charging. All that's illegal. You must keep the consumer in the dark. That's the law in America.
So for people who want to be as independent as they can from the system and want to get by on a minimal budget, but they want to reduce the serious risks that they might incur if they had some gosh awful thing happen, there's this combination. It sounds like a lot of this prudent self-care that we're talking about eating the right nutrition, eating fermented foods, taking your vitamin D, taking your lysine, all these other things. But then there's having on hand some of these home remedies that could avoid having to engage the medical system in the first place if you
Absolutely.
can.
Don't start.
But then as a safety net, though, if you did, heaven forbid, get hit by a truck or whatever it might be, you've got to have, otherwise you're basically you're betting it all. You're betting your whole family's financial future
Absolutely.
on
That's not right.
Yeah.
When my dad was in practice and I was young, I remember that sometimes I used to go with him on rounds, and I was just a kid. And sometimes he would pick some old farmer up, and he'd walk into the hospital and he'd walk down to the radiologist and he'd tell the head of radiology, this guy's got no money and I need to know if he's got an ulcer. And the radiologist would give the guy a cup of contrast media to drink and go in and take a couple shots with the thing and go, yeah, David, you're right. There's an antral ulcer. And he'd say, fine. The guy'd walk out and there was no charge. Okay. What did it cost? 3 minutes at radiologist's time and 10 cents worth of contrast media and 3 cents worth of electricity. Okay. There was no cost to that. And my dad just took that person who was going to be bankrupted by this test and went on and probably gave him his meds too. I mean, when you get done, if we would get rid of all the regulations and open everything up, what do you really want as a doctor? You want a guy who you also want as your neighbor and who you'd enjoy going fishing with, who thinks logically and is first of all and foremost open-minded and interested in your welfare and is willing to negotiate. Good luck with that.
Well, you've given us a lot, as always, to think about, and we're just grateful for you tackling this topic with us of avoiding and treating infections. We'll have to have you back again because I know we still haven't got back to allergies and a number of other things we want to tackle.
Allergies is out there, a whole field, man. Lots to talk about.
We've been talking with Dr. Jay Nielsen, MD. He's our off-grid doc, and he's here with us again. So thank you for joining us on Reluctant Preppers.
Thank you. Pleasure.